The story begins in a giant prison during a thunderstorm. There are several prisoners in the prison yard fighting in the rain. It's very brutal, but the guards are just standing by. One of the prisoners is a giant man with a mask called Mylok, and he lifts up another prisoner and kills him. After the battle is over, the masked man must be captured by the guards. In the meantime, we see a man in his cell writing something in his book. Soon enough he stops writing and stabs his cellmate to death. We then see the prison guards burying the dead prisoners nearby the notorious prison. The following day, we are introduced to Kyle LeBlanc. He is an American and working in Russia, but is very often away from his wife. He calls her, and she is worried that he is working too much and not spending enough time with her. But Kyle promises that this will be his last job, and he will be back home very soon. After he stops talking with his wife, Kyle goes back to work. While he is driving home, he is talking to his wife on the phone. She tells him that she feels lonely in this city all alone. But they get interrupted when the power runs out in her apartment. Kyle's wife is now scared, and we see that a dangerous man is stalking her home. Kyle is also worried about his wife and tries to call her back. The horrible man attacks his wife and starts to beat her. Kyle hears her scream and tries to rush home as fast as he can. He almost gets into several traffic accidents because of his reckless driving. Kyle tries to call the police, but they don't understand him. Soon enough he reaches his house and rushes to save his wife. But unfortunately it's too late, she is already dead. Kyle is heartbroken and doesn't know what to do. He then gets furious and runs after the killer. Kyle goes outside and spots the killer boarding a train. He rushes after the killer and also gets on the train. The two then start a brutal fight. Kyle is fighting with everything he has, but the killer is very skilled. And soon they both end up in the street fighting. The police then arrive and they arrest Kyle, but the killer gets away. After a while, Kyle ends up in court and his lawyers are trying to convict the killer. The killer is called Sergio, and he comes from a very wealthy family. For that reason, the judge releases Sergio and he is now again a free man. Kyle can't believe that the killer won't face any punishment. The judge lies and tells everyone that there isn't enough evidence to convict Sergio of anything. Kyle loses control and attacks one of the courthouse officers, then takes his gun. He tracks down Sergio and shots him multiple times in front of everyone in the courthouse. Kyle then gets arrested and actually gets into big trouble. He is then prosecuted and finds out that he will not be allowed to have parole or minimize his sentence, and gets sentenced to life in the notorious prison. That is the same prison we saw at the start, but Kyle really doesn't care what happens to him at this point. When the prisoners reach the prison, they get harassed by the older prisoners there. Soon, they all form a line and are introduced to General Khrushchev. He is the warden of the prison and very corrupt and brutal. The general presents a prisoner that tried to escape the prison and shows him off as an example that they will never be able to run away from this prison. We are then introduced to Billy. He is only 21 years old and he is also an American like Kyle. Kyle's problems in the prison start right away when all the prisoners must give away everything they have. Kyle refuses to give away his wedding ring and he starts to create problems with the guards. The first night in the prison, Kyle sees Billy being taken away by the guards. Billy is really scared and doesn't know what is happening. They take him to a Russian gangster called Andre. He then beats and assaults Billy. Andre is also one of the best fighters in the entire prison, so he is feared by many. The following morning, Billy is totally traumatized and he is barely talking. The guards seemingly work together to give Andre new victims. Kyle, seeing all of this, and decides to step in and help. He is furious at Andre because he is very similar to the man who killed his wife. Kyle starts a brutal fight with Andre, but the guards get involved and take Kyle to solitary confinement. Kyle spends many days in this dark room, and at some point he decides to refuse food so that he can die. He then also tries to hang himself, but both of his attempts to kill himself fail, and he must continue living in this horrible prison. While he is still alone in solitary confinement, he remembers his loving wife and decides to survive for her. Soon after that, Kyle gets transferred into a new cell. His cellmate is called Inmate 451. He is a prisoner that is also from America, and he is feared by many in the prison. We are also introduced to Talik. He is the one who sent Kyle to be in the same cell with inmate 451. Talik strongly believes that Kyle will soon be killed, and he wanted to set him up with the worst prisoner he could. This plan seems to fail, as Kyle and inmate 451 start to bond and become allies. As time goes on, the two men form a trust between each other and decide to help each other. We see Kyle gets to meet more of the prisoners and talks with Billy for the first time. Billy tells him that he is serving only a year-and-a-half sentence, and that because he was driving while being drunk and crashed into a restaurant with his girlfriend. Kyle also gets introduced to Malachi. He is also from America and he is in a wheelchair. He tells Kyle how things work in this horrible prison and explains that there are specific rules and dangers. The most problematic is the Russian mafia, who directly work with the guards. We then find out that the general organizes special fights between rival gang members in the prison. He bets a lot of money on these games, and they are very brutal. Andre and his men seem to hate Kyle and want to torture him. Kyle gets into trouble with them very often. After a while, he decides to train so that he can defend himself and others from the evil prisoners. Kyle starts to brutally train every day, but his cellmate is worried about him. Soon after that, Kyle becomes part of the fighting tournament, and his first opponent is Andre. They start fighting, but Andre is a lot more skilled in combat. Nevertheless, Kyle wins the fight, as he is very brutal. He bites Andre on his neck and kills him that way. It's very shocking as no one expected Kyle to win. He is in shock after seeing Andre die in front of him, starts to lose his mind, and the guards are also afraid of him. He then decides to continue fighting other prisoners. After some time passes, it seems that he has made peace that he will live in this prison until his death. A lot of the prisoners now fear him and see him as a leader. Kyle, on the other hand, has become more brutal, and his past self is almost totally gone. He soon meets with his brother, who wants to help him to get out. Kyle refuses his help, as he knows everything will fail. He knows that he will stay here forever, and he has no hope left. Billy has had enough of the abuse he suffers every day, so he decides to finally escape from the prison. He tries several times, and fails each time. While the Russian guards are celebrating, he tries once more, but gets betrayed by Malachi. He tells the guards this information because he will get him more medicine. Inmate 451 finds out about this betrayal and burns Malachi and kills him. Billy gets captured and they put him in the same cell as Valia. Valia is another ruthless fighter who wants to abuse him. Billy gets beaten through the entire night, and after some time, he dies from his injuries. But before his death, Billy tells Kyle that he must not allow this prison to ruin him as a person. Kyle is ordered to fight in another prison fight, and he wants to prove to himself that he has not totally lost himself in the prison. Kyle must fight Valia, but he refuses. The guards are furious with him, and they hang him by his arms in the yard, so that everyone can see him. The gangs are all impressed how Kyle stood up to the guards, and they decide to no longer help the guards. When the general demands that they fight, everyone in the prison refuses. Kyle then gets released and has to recover. He remembers his wife and wants to honor her memory. He gets confronted by the general, who is very angry at the entire situation. And he hates that the prisoners don't listen to him anymore. He tells Kyle that he must fight against Mylok, and that will be his final fight. Mylok is notorious and is kept away from all the other prisoners. But Kyle actually had communication with Mylok through his time in the prison. And that happened when Kyle heard another prisoner banging on the wall when he was in the cell alone. And when their fight begins, Mylok recognizes Kyle as a friend and they hug. The guards pull out their guns and demand that they fight, but then Kyle tells them that they will have to kill him, and he will fight no longer. The prisoners are now furious, and they start to yell and scream at the guards. Mylok and Kyle fight the guards, and start to free the prisoners. But Mylok gets shot in the prison riot by protecting Kyle. There is now total chaos in the prison, as everybody is fighting against the guards. Inmate 451 and Kyle join forces to get free from the prison. He gives Kyle secret papers that show evidence of all the corruption in the prison over the past 20 years. The guards start to regain control of the prison, and he shows Kyle a secret passageway that leads to the prison garage. Kyle now must fight Valia to escape, and Kyle gets the upper hand. He kills Valia as revenge for what he did to Billy. The guards arrive and take away Kyle. Their plan is now to kill him as he has caused massive problems for them. Inmate 451 attacks the guards and kills one of them. He decides to stay in the prison to kill the general and is then taken away by the guards. Kyle takes one guard as a hostage and takes the key to free himself. He then puts on the guard's uniform and drives off in one of the cars. Kyle is now finally free and away from the prison. Thanks for watching, take care, and see you in the next video.
Back in my bag and I gotta brag, I do this shit for real. When we was down and we had nothing, we had to share a meal. We put the shit in overdrive with no steering